year, £1.25 billion is stolen from the NHS. That's money meant for doctors and nurses to run hospitals and to help us all when we fall ill. We're on the hunt with the crack teams of investigators.
This is a huge theft on a grand scale.
The treatment that he received hadn't happened. This is a fraud.
Tracking down the fraudsters, stealing public money.
They actually talk about, is what we're doing fraud? We are the villains, aren't we?
Locking them up and getting the cash back where it belongs.
Just under £1.5 million is going to be paid to some of the victims in our case.
Just over £23,000 back into the public purse.
The fraud squad is on the case. Today, a greedy pharmacist alters his customers' prescriptions to get drugs he can sell for cash.
He'd simply abused the patient's details for his own personal gain.
And a hospital cashier leads the high life by taking money meant for patients and putting it into her own bank account.
They spend £30,000 on holidays, spa treatments, dining out.
Every penny counts in the NHS. With around 65 million people in the UK, that's a lot of patients to look after. But in our next case, a group of crooks looked at a cash-strapped NHS and saw an opportunity for an audacious theft on a grand scale. Over a period of 5 years, an international gang of fraudsters steal over £12.5 million from the NHS and 21 other targeted organisations. The criminals fool these groups by forging letters requesting a change in bank details. After a tough 4-year police investigation, 11 gang members are put behind bars. The case started in 2011 when senior fraud investigator Cathy Howard got a call from Lincolnshire Hospital Trust. A £1.28 million payment has gone missing.
My first thought on this case was that is a hell of a lot of money that's gone, so we need to really make sure that we're really proactive about this and move as quickly as you can.
Lincolnshire Hospital is having a £25 million mental health rehabilitation unit built. In charge is Costain Limited, a well-respected building firm. The multi-million-pound contract is being paid for in instalments from the hospital trust into the Costain account. Monthly direct debits have been made for the last 18 months. When out of the blue, the hospital's finance department receive a letter they believe to be from Costain.
They were requesting a change of bank details. The change of bank details had been verified to the best of their ability and processed.
The hospital alters the bank details accordingly. A month later, the finance office gets a surprising call from Costain
and said, we haven't received this payment of just under £1.3 million. Could you help us and tell us where it's gone?
The trust has paid the bill, so where's the money gone?
The trust made their own internal inquiries. They confirmed that the payment had been made and it had been made into the new bank account as requested by Costain.
But Costain say they never sent the letter.
It was then realised that the money had been paid into a bogus bank account.
Over £1 million has been stolen from the hospital. They call in the counter-fraud investigators. Cathy starts by looking at the letter the hospital believed to be from Costain Limited.
I worked with our financial investigator. He would take the details that were written on the letter that had been sent into the trust, and he would make inquiries with the respective bank to determine what and who that bank account belonged to.
Kathy and her team quickly discover the stolen money is not just sitting in one bank account.
We knew at that point that the monies were moving very quickly into registered companies. So inquiries then had to be made as to who was behind these companies and where the money had gone to and why.
This was starting to look like a carefully planned mass fraud. As the team of investigators press on with their inquiries, it becomes apparent this is not the only case within the NHS.
I had more and more of these, what we called mandate frauds, arriving that were showing the NHS as the loser, using exactly the same MO, where a letter had gone into the respective trusts. They said, we've changed our bank account details, can you please change them on your system? What started off with a couple of incidents that were directly affecting NHS bodies turned out to be something much bigger.
Later, with new cases coming in thick and fast, Kathy calls in the police.
The more we got into it, the more we realised this is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
The NHS employs around 1.5 million people, making it the 5th largest employer in the world. The majority of these people are hardworking, dedicated and trustworthy. But a few will try and cheat the system and abuse their position purely out of greed. This is a story of a woman in charge of NHS cash, but instead of giving it to the patients, she spends it on herself. Foreign holidays, high-end shopping, eating out in posh restaurants. But one day, the police come knocking on the door. And the aptly named Mrs. Money is caught red-handed. This is the scene of Mrs. Money's crime, Memorial Hospital in South London. Here they look after the most vulnerable people in society. Their day-to-day spending money is handled by the cashier's office, but over the past few months, large amounts have been mysteriously disappearing. The hospital brings in the investigators. Clive Wyke is the man in charge.
There was a difference between what was expected to be in the float and what was actually in the float, and basically there was about £140,000 short.
What's happened to this hefty sum of money? Determined to find out, Clive confiscates all documents from the finance office.
There's probably about 20 boxes worth of information that we had to wade through. Thick wallets of paperwork which we had to look at, each one of them individually.
What Clive finds immediately sets alarm bells ringing.
Money was not being banked as it should be, so it was the case of going through the paperwork and trying to work out exactly how big the actual loss was going to be. So, as part of the investigation, we requested all of the accountancy documents from the trust, so they are all of the money that's been paid out of the cashier's office and all of the money that's been paid into the trust bank account. So, for example, this one, which is in September 2009, shows who's been paid and the amounts of money they've been paid, and that one shows a float of £57,644. This one, which was completed 2 years later, shows a float of £160,292, which is basically a £100,000 rise, which for any organisation having a petty cash flow of that amount would be extraordinary.
So, over 2 years, the total amount of money held in the float has increased by a staggering £100,000. Who authorised this huge rise? Clive turns his focus to the people controlling the cash flow. One of these is Mrs. Brenda Money.
Mrs. Money started with the NHS Trust in 2004. She was employed as a cashier. She worked 3 days a week, and she was responsible for the day-to-day running of the hospital site's petty cash. She had a responsibility to the NHS to ensure that the money was spent correctly and collected correctly.
Investigating a potential fraud, Clive takes a look at Mrs. Money's personal bank account. For an NHS employee on an annual income of around £12,000, the figures don't add up.
We could see that there was an awful lot of cash being paid into her bank account.
But there could be a simple explanation. Brenda Money shares her bank account with husband David. He runs a car repair business from their home. Was the money earned by him?
His earnings that he took out from the business were between £12,000 and £17,000 a year, and his turnover was £27,000 to £30,000 a year.
So combining their two incomes, Mr. and Mrs. Money have between £24,000 to £30,000 to live on for a year. That would only just cover their monthly mortgage repayments of £2,000. However, there's evidence clearly showing they're living the high life with plenty of disposable cash.
They spend £30,000 on just holidays, spa treatments, and dining out. This does show a lavish lifestyle, especially when you compare that their income was about £30,000 a year.
The couple are living way beyond their means, splashing the cash on 5 luxury foreign holidays in just 18 months.
We can see from this that in the period January 2010 through to October 2011, they took 5 holidays and pre-booked a further one at one resort in Turkey. I think the total to those came to around about £14,000.
The dishonest couple also appear to have spent £26,000 in grocery deliveries from Ocado, Marks & Spencer and John Lewis.
We always look at where the money's been spent because we need to know if there's been a motive behind it, but basically it bottoms down to people being greedy.
Finding out how greedy Brenda Money has been is Clive's next challenge.
An example here is in July 2011, £14,000 had been received from Royal Borough of Greenwich and £4,700 had been banked. And then we were able to compare the amount of money that had been put into the Money's bank account at the same period, and we can see that there's basically £12,000 that have gone in. Another example is 20th of August 2010. Money received from Royal Borough of Greenwich was £9,575. The cashier's office banked £2 and 8p, and £10,500 was deposited into the Money's bank account during the same period.
Clive does the maths, and the amount stolen by Mrs. Money from the hospital is rising.
During the entire period of the fraud, cash was deposited into their bank accounts, a total of £164,000.
Later, Mrs. Money gets a rude awakening.
So we arrived at this property with the police. She was still in bed when we banged on the door.
The team at the NHS Counter-Fraud Authority investigate the most serious, complex and high-profile cases of fraud. It's not a job for the faint-hearted.
A good intelligence officer has 3 main things. They must be logical, they must be inquiring, not accept information or intelligence at face value, but look at it in a wider picture.
I think a good investigator has to be a bit like a dog with a bone, with a sense of humour thrown in, because you've just got to keep at it. There aren't any shortcuts, but you also have to be able to laugh an awful lot, because some of the stuff that we have to deal with it can be quite hard. If you don't laugh, you're going to cry.
I think the 2 most important skills for an investigator are objectivity and an eye for detail.
And to be tenacious on some occasions, to really go for it and say, what can we do here? Don't accept the first answer.
Kathy Howard is investigating a £1.3 million fraud against a hospital in Lincolnshire. But the more she digs, the more similar cases she finds. Before long, she has a shocking 31 suspected frauds to investigate. It's time to call in the police.
Economic Crime Unit, Mike Bloom speaking. Can I help you?
Mike Billam is the Detective Inspector of Lincolnshire's Economic Crime Unit. He starts with the alleged theft of £1.3 million from the county hospital.
My initial thoughts were that this is a large amount of money and it wouldn't be too difficult to trace. A lot of it through the banking system, but obviously the more we got into it, the more we realised this is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
Mike will have to use all of his 16 years of police experience if he's going to crack this complex case. He starts by examining the letter that was sent to Lincolnshire Hospital requesting the change of bank details.
As you can see, it's made out to be quite authentic. We've got the logo of the construction company at the top, references, emails which are correct. Then we've got notification of the change of bank details. This goes into quite a bit of detail, and the invoice number is on there and supplier number is on there, which really adds to the authenticity of the letter. But in it here is the request to change the bank details to the fraudulent bank account. Obviously we compared it with true details that Costains would have supplied us and checked against the telephone numbers and references that were on here, and there were some differences, but to the untrained eye that looked quite a genuine document.
Unfortunately, 2 months have passed since the payment into the fraudulent bank account was made.
The problem that we had was that there was a time lapse between the NHS sending the money to the bank account and realising that it hadn't gone where it was intended, so we were on the back foot. What we do then is make inquiries with the banks to try and find out if there's still money left or where it's been transferred to.
It's not long before the money is tracked down, but worryingly, the huge sum is no longer in the UK.
The money moved very quickly and it was taken out in 3 or 4 transactions, and it moved out of the UK recipient bank account and it was moved overseas to United Arab Emirates, Dubai.
Over the next few months, there's a steady trickle of information, but one big discovery. This fraud has not been carried out by just one individual, but a large, organised criminal gang. One of them is 40-year-old Monica Thompson.
She lived in Airdrie in Scotland. She was one of the ones that was in control of one of the accounts that we knew the money had gone to, and as it turned out, had access to the account that the main money had gone into.
The investigation leads the team from Lincolnshire to Scotland and directly to one of the suspected gang leaders. Mike and his team go to arrest Miss Thompson.
She was arrested at a home address. We had a warrant to search the address and she was there. So I think surprised, a little bit shocked, a little bit tearful, as you'd probably expect.
She's taken to a police station for interview.
She was talkative in interview, a little bit vague on detail, but didn't deny moving the money, but tried to put it into some business context. She was really key to our investigation. The fact that we'd made an early arrest, I think, caught many people by surprise, and we were able to secure quite a lot of evidence that was quite crucial to the rest of the case.
Her house is searched and a number of items are seized.
Were these all found in Monica Thompson's computer bag?
Yes, this one I think is Monica's. That's from Europower Systems Limited.
And all of these have been fingerprinted and no results?
Yes. So this is a laptop bag that we seized from the home address of Monica Thompson. So this item was quite key to the case, and as you'd expect, it contains a laptop. The documentation that was found on that particular laptop was crucial to the investigation, but probably more so the email address that had been used by Monica Thompson and Asif Habib.
53-year-old Asif Habib from Dubai appears to be the sole named director and bank account holder of the fraudulent company the stolen monies are going into.
Also in the laptop bag, we found this document, which was put together by Asif Habib and Monica Thompson, but this actually gives a list of things that they had to do to cover up the 1.2 million that had just come into their account. So this was the instructions, really, for them to disguise that fraudulent payment as a legitimate business deal.
The police are starting to build a picture of who's behind these blatant thefts from the NHS. There are more arrests and hundreds of items seized. including phones and laptops.
So everything was done all at the same time, so the information was all gathered at the same time. And one of our strong points is that we have a dedicated forensic computing unit. They're very experienced, they're very good at what they do, and they help us on almost every investigation that we do.
Guy Linkletter is a forensic computing specialist.
I think in the space of 24 hours we received 92 evidence items included, but we're not limited to laptops, games consoles, USB drives, digital cameras, and I think we received in excess of 90 telephones, mobile telephones, 130 SIM cards. It's one of the largest that we've had within the forensic computing unit. The digital images resulted in over 8 million items being processed and indexed within the case. So the aim there is to try and sort the wheat out from the chaff and figure it out. Where is the actual evidence here?
Guy and his team quickly start feeding back information to Mike. One crucial piece is another email address found on Monica Thompson's laptop.
They used this particular email to contact each other, but she'd also used it to contact those further up the chain that were organising the fraud. So we were able, from that, to then move up that communication chain and eventually got to the person that we thought was at the hub of organising these frauds and the money laundering that followed it.
Mike and his team are closing in on the gang, who appear to have stolen millions of pounds from the Lincolnshire Hospital and other NHS trusts. Suddenly, the investigation takes a huge leap into the unknown when Monica Thompson's laptop bag is searched again and a cheque for £385,000 is discovered. This cheque is from another fraud, one completely unrelated to the NHS investigation. This time, the gang have stolen from a world-renowned college.
When we realised that they'd come from another fraud against the Royal College of Art in London, where money had gone from the similar payment divert fraud and gone into an account in the West Midlands. And from there, a cheque had been written to the Millennium Circus account, which was the same account that the Lincolnshire money had gone into.
Is it possible this one criminal gang are also responsible for all the frauds Kathy and Mike are investigating? Mike looks for a connection.
So as you can see from just these 6 examples here, there are certain similarities between them. If you take this one, for instance, this one was sent to the TSS and Weir Valley NHS Trust. It's set out in a particular way, and it's signed by David Smith, the finance director, purporting to be from Keir. The one underneath is one that was sent to the Royal College of Art, set out exactly the same way, signed again by David Smith, finance director. It's the same signature that's on the one that's purporting to be from Keir. David Smith is used on this one, accounts manager. Again, this is one that was sent to the Royal Free Hampstead Hospital. You also see the way they've asked for the details to be changed. The account name should remain as currently held by you, it says on this one, and the same wording is used on this one. The account name should remain as currently held by you. And same on this one, the same on this one. So it's set out in exactly the same way. This confirms to me that the same people have compiled these letters.
Later, they identify the man at the heart of the fraud, but can they track him down?
All we had was an email address that Monica Thompson was communicating with, and it was very, very difficult for us to catch up with him.
The High Street Pharmacy is a vital resource in the community. 1.6 million of us use them every day for our prescriptions or to get advice from a trusted professional. But what if your local pharmacist was more focused on profits than prescriptions? Up next, the case of a trusted pharmacist who forges prescriptions to get thousands of pounds worth of drugs, then sells them on to line his own pockets. Aberdeen, Scotland. A patient visits their local pharmacy to pick up a prescription. But the company who supplies the medication stops the order. They suspect someone has tampered with the patient's prescription.
The company weren't satisfied that this was a legitimate order. This delayed the prescription being fulfilled for a full 3 weeks, meaning that the patient had to sit and wait for 3 weeks longer than they should have done for the medication they required.
All fingers point to well-respected pharmacist, 50-year-old Conrad Chow. Surely this pillar of the community, who's managed the pharmacy for over 12 years, can't be the one responsible. National Counter-Fraud Manager Scott Fraser is called in to investigate.
We were contacted by colleagues up in NHS Grampian on the northeast coast of Scotland to inform us that concerns had been raised that pharmacist Conrad Chow had been submitting fake prescriptions.
It was one of the big drug companies which supplies the pharmacy who'd alerted the NHS about Chow.
He was the senior pharmacist and the owner of the Holborn Pharmacy in Aberdeen. He's a well-paid, well-respected member of the community, earns a decent salary.
Scott's team wastes no time in analysing some of the suspect prescriptions. They're clearly fakes.
What we've got here are 3 of the prescriptions that Conrad Chow used as part of this fraud. When we examined the original prescription against the fake that he submitted to the pharmaceutical company, what we can see essentially is he's used the basis of the original prescription, but we can see that there's a number of anomalies to do with the barcodes, the serial numbers. We can see when we compare them that where the genuine prescription contains the medication prescribed by the GP for the patient, what this has actually been turned into by Conrad Chow is something completely different. He's actually changed the drug type. Conrad Chow then emailed this document off to the pharmaceutical suppliers in order to obtain the medication.
By copying his patients' genuine prescriptions, but changing the drug type, Conrad Chow is able to get his hands on some of the most expensive drugs on the market. And he's getting away with it because the suppliers have assumed the medication is for genuine patients. The pharmaceutical supplier Eli Lilly have become so suspicious of Chow's demands for expensive drugs, they've halted their supplies to him. Now even legitimate patients are at risk of not getting their medication. As Scott digs deeper, there's a new revelation.
We're made aware of similar concerns by a pharmaceutical company called Novartis. They too have concerns that the prescriptions being supplied to them by Conrad Chow are indeed false.
With the allegations against Chow building, Scott decides to extend the investigation to include all prescriptions submitted to both pharmaceutical providers by Conrad Chow.
We established that we had a total of 122 prescriptions that we believed had been forged and sent to both Eli Lilly and Novartis.
Scott suspects Conrad Chow is selling the drugs to make money, but he needs to prove it.
We were very confident that what we were looking at was a deliberate fraud conducted by Conrad Chow to get medication that he wasn't entitled to. He'd simply abused the patient's details in order to get these drugs for his own personal gain.
Accompanied by the police, Scott Fraser's team of investigators go to the pharmacy and confront Conrad Chow.
He was very mild-mannered, he was very polite, he was very helpful and supportive, and in many ways there was no indication that there was anything wrong, but underneath that he must have known that we were going to find stuff.
And that's exactly what they do.
The search on the day took a number of hours, and by the end of it there was quite a number of items of evidence recovered, including computers, some hard disks, a number of financial records, and of course prescriptions and prescription schedules.
The computers and hard drives are sent to forensic experts to be analysed. Their astonishing findings reveal the true extent of this crime.
We found a number of email chains and conversations that Conrad Chow had entered into, during which he'd actually admitted the offence. He's basically saying, I've faked several fake prescriptions to these companies, however they realise the prescriptions are fake and I do not receive any of the items.
The person receiving Chow's incriminating emails is the wholesaler that he's been selling the drugs to, who in turn then sells them on for a profit abroad.
I will plead not guilty and I will not do it again. Please help me to prepare some private prescriptions.
The email chain also reveals that after becoming aware of the extent of Chow's fraud, the wholesaler recommends Chow seeks legal advice. By looking at his financial records, it's clear that Chow is making thousands of pounds from his fraud. But Scott's investigation is about to uncover something even bigger.
We could see evidence relating to a company that had been based offshore, and there were a number of discrepancies in some of the financial records that we highlighted. We now had concerns over potential tax fraud.
What started out as a local counter-fraud case has now snowballed into a joint investigation with HMRC, who believe Chow is committing VAT fraud on a huge scale. Whilst the tax fraud is investigated, Scott's team bring Chow in for a voluntary interview under caution.
He made a number of full and frank admissions in relation to the fraud. He stated that all of the 122 prescriptions had indeed been forged and that he had changed the drug quoted on all of the prescriptions. What he also admitted was that he'd done this for financial gain. He was purely in it to sell the drugs on for an inflated value to a wholesaler.
Eventually, after an investigation lasting 4 years, Conrad Chow appears at Aberdeen Sheriff Court. He pleads guilty to all 14 NHS charges and 1 charge of tax fraud. He's sent to prison for 20 months. And following a proceeds of crime hearing, Chow is ordered to pay back £432,000 for the crimes committed against the NHS and HMRC.
We consider that to be a good sentence and a strong deterrent to anybody considering this type of behaviour. This fraud was motivated by greed, pure and simple. There was no other reason to do this. It's purely greed.
It's not just about locking up criminals. The Counter-Fraud Authority is just as keen to prevent these crimes happening in the first place.
Well, it might sound a little trite in a healthcare setting, but prevention is always better than cure. If you prevent the fraud happening in the first place, then you haven't got the problems of investigating and prosecuting.
A lot of the fraud goes undetected because, a bit like an iceberg, a lot of the situation, a lot of things that are actually happening below the surface line.
We try to prevent it, we try to deter people from committing fraud, we try to make sure that the NHS is not a target for fraud. That saves the NHS money.
What started out as a £1.3 million fraud against one hospital trust has ballooned into what's looking like an international scam, targeting not only dozens of NHS hospitals, but other public bodies. NHS investigators suspect the total amount of fraud committed by the gang could be over £12 million. Their challenge is to prove it by finding concrete evidence.
The value of the fraud, I mean, in this instance, it was £12 million, so it was really a large-scale fraud. We were excited about, obviously, establishing the truth and seeing if we could help Lincolnshire Police at that stage recover monies for the NHS trusts that had lost that money.
One of the biggest challenges in a case like this is just the sheer volume of information that we hold and seize. We've got something like 5,000 exhibits. There's over 6,000 individual documents, 1,000 witness statements, and that's without the electronic data that runs into millions of files. So just to manage that information is quite onerous.
Suddenly, there's a breakthrough when another gang member is identified.
Stephen Tyndale was one of the key players in the investigation, but all we had was an email address that Monica Thompson was communicating with, and it was very, very difficult for us to actually locate and name Tyndale.
2 years later, Mike and his team finally tracked down the ringleader, Stephen Tyndale, along with a number of other potential gang members.
I think in all we did over 128 suspect interviews, lasting probably way in excess of 100 hours of actual interview time.
Eventually, Stephen Tyndale and the other gang members are summoned to court.
So in total, we convicted 13 individuals for the offences, 9 of which pleaded guilty prior to trial and 4 were found guilty at trial.
In total, 11 gang members are jailed, with a combined sentence of 50 years. This is a case unprecedented on scale.
In all, there were 22 offences that we linked together as part of this investigation. Not all of these frauds were successful. If those had been accepted, we'd be looking way in excess of £12 million.
Today, Mike is hoping to get back some of the millions stolen to give back to the victims, such as the NHS.
After 7 years of hard work on this case, which is certainly the biggest case I've worked on and probably the biggest fraud case for Lincolnshire Police, we're here at Leicester Crown Court for proceeds of crime matters. Hopefully, during the day, we're going to get an order in excess of £1.3 million on one order, which is going to make a huge difference to the victims in this case. I'm pleased to say that the judge has granted 2 confiscation orders today, one for Monica Thompson and one for Walter Batsoma. Together, they represent some £1.5 million that are going to go back to some of the victims in this case. So some significant compensation is going to be paid out. The work still continues. We've still got more proceeds of crime matters to finalise. We'll continue to keep getting back more money for the victims in this case.
Brenda Money has fleeced over £160,000 from the hospital where she works by diverting petty cash meant for patients into her own bank account.
Once we'd gone through all the paperwork, we'd identified where the money had been lost or where it should have been, and we understood the extent of the fraud. We knew that there was a case to answer.
Clive calls in the police and they head out to confront Mrs. Money at the house where she was living at the time.
You always feel a bit awkward because you're tearing someone's life apart, but it's the interesting part of the job. All your inquiries have led to that point. We've obviously done our research beforehand and we were confident that there was questions that she needed to answer regarding the alleged fraud, but we were confident that we could prove it. So we arrived at this property with the police. She was still in bed when we banged on the door. She didn't really say a lot at the time.
She's arrested and taken away.
We then conducted a search of the house looking for any evidence. Mr. Money was as shocked as anyone would be if their wife was being arrested, but he was very helpful and showed us around the property. We searched the house, we uncovered a laptop, household receipts and household expenditure, and the business records for David Money.
Brenda Money is taken to Plumstead Police Station, where Clive interviews her under caution. He's convinced she's actually stolen close to £300,000.
She basically denied all the allegations that had been put to her. She was very sure of herself and said it was nobody understood the procedures in the hospital for the finance department and that she hadn't done anything wrong. Brenda was confident. She was adamant that there was no fraud. As time went on, she didn't change from her views in the interview. It was always down to accountancy, people not understanding why or how the system worked properly.
Mr. Money is also brought in for questioning.
He denied all knowledge of the fraud and said that the money going into the bank account again came from his cash earnings as a mechanic.
Clive goes to investigate Mr. Money's business premises, the garage he says is raking in enough cash to fund their lavish lifestyle.
And this is the garage where they said that they were running the business. As you can see, it's no more than 4 metres across and it's been run on a very quiet lane at the back of the house, quite overgrown. It's unlikely that you're going to get a lot of traffic through here. And from this building, they were claiming to have turning over £70,000 a year in cash from this business, which is unlikely. In the property, we found the invoices and receipts relating to David Money's business. They showed that the turnover was matching what he was declaring to HMRC and not the £70,000 that she said in interview.
Brenda Money is given one more chance to come clean and admit to stealing tens of thousands of pounds from the NHS.
Each time Brenda was interviewed, her attitude didn't really change. She was adamant that there was no fraud being committed. She's a very strong character, quite forthright in her opinion of what's gone on, in her attitude and her views.
Brenda Money clearly thinks she has a foolproof way of fleecing the system, but Clive knows he has the evidence to prove she's just a common thief. Mr. and Mrs. Money appear at Woolwich Crown Court. Brenda Money is charged with fraud by abuse of power. But the case is suddenly adjourned when she pulls a rabbit out of the hat.
So this is a flowchart that was provided by Mrs. Money, her version of why there was no fraud, what happened to the money, and in fact, instead of the $293,000 that we say has been taken during the fraud, it basically says that it's all accounted for except for £46.82. So normally defence statements are in the form of a document, not a flow chart, so this was quite an unusual thing to come across and something that I'd never seen before, and obviously we had to take time to look into the reasons given. It's kind of a deflation because you know that the trial is not going to proceed, that you're going to have to take everything back home with you and go through all of this again.
Clive examines the chart carefully to see if there's any truth in what Mrs. Money has created. It very quickly becomes clear that it's just a desperate attempt to outwit Clive and his team. It fails, and 5 months later, they're back in court. The flowchart thrown out as evidence. After a 6-week trial, Brenda Money is found guilty of stealing over £290,000 from the NHS. She's sentenced to 30 months behind bars. Mr. Money is charged with acquiring criminal property and jailed for 15 months.
They receive substantial prison sentences. It goes to show that fraud against the NHS is not to be tolerated, that we will always look to investigate fraud and prosecute where necessary.
The Moneys have had to pay back nearly £150,000, money that's gone straight back into the NHS. All these cases go to show that anyone out there who thinks the NHS is an easy target had better think again. The Fraud Squad is on the case.
Holby City's under pressure and Rick's determined to do something about it, but not without repercussions, tonight at 8 here on BBC One.